Welcome to CIS 136. What we're going to do is first explore our workspace, so please launch InDesign. The icon usually falls at the bottom of your dock, and in this case you can't see it here, but it looks something like this. It's pink. It's like a cyan color with, or a magenta color with the ID icon up top. This is a menu that shows you sort of the recent items that you've worked on, or you can create a new one, a new document, a new book, and a new library. Here what we're going to do is we're just going to create a new document. Each and every time that you open InDesign, this isn't the case. You don't have this as long as you're opening a familiar document. It will go immediately into that document if you double click on the icon on your desktop. So here is a new document window if you're starting from scratch. And normally these things you want to be sure that you are inputting the proper functions for what you're going to be working on. At times you're going to want facing pages if you're working on a booklet. I sometimes don't like that checked because it makes me go back in and uncheck it if I'm working on a one-page document. So I'm going to have you all just unclick this to get to know your workspace. The number of pages we're going to keep is 1. Our intent is print for right now. You can let it default to custom. A lot of times it doesn't take you very long to go through this menu just because you kind of know the project you're working on. Page size, we're going to keep it at letter. Columns. Columns aren't your standard columns like you see in Word. Columns are actually invisible guides for you to work from and to start to align your elements and design them so that they're aligned on the left, on the right. I normally like a 3-column grid. If you've heard anything about a grid with regards to graphic design, the grid is actually one of those things that you want to keep your elements aligned to, and they will not print in the end. It's just something for you to use as far as like allowing your elements to be aligned, and that's very important when it comes to text and images. Margins, I let that default as well. We are operating in picas. That's something that you can decide what's best for you. I do not like picas. So what I'm going to do here is cancel out of this menu. Go to InDesign Preferences, and if you're on a PC, you want to go to Edit Preferences. You want to go down to Units and Increments, Edit Preferences, Units and Increments on a PC, InDesign Preferences, Units and Increments on a Mac. Okay, I'm going to change this to page. I'm going to do inches. I prefer working from inches, as most of us I think would feel most comfortable working in inches. And then just say OK. Then we'll go back to File, Document Setup. Now we have our page size. I'm going to unclick Facing Pages. You can also go to File, New Document, which will bring up that original menu that you've had. Now we can see everything in inches. You have orientation, which can be landscape or portrait. I'm going to keep it on portrait. Columns, again, I like to work on a 3-column grid. Margins, 0.5, half of an inch. I'm going to bump that down to 1/4 of an inch. I like to give myself just a little bit more space closer to the edge or the trim of the page. And you'll see what I mean when I open up the document. The bleed and slug, that's something that, bleed is something that has kind of been identified by the printing industry and the production industry on how close you want your elements to the trim edge. You want to pull them out past the edge of the trim of the page, and we'll discuss that further as the class proceeds. But we want to make sure that these elements aren't right at the edge of the trim of the page, because what ends up happening is when you send it to production, and they extend beyond the trimmed page, you give yourself a little safety room if the press decides it wants to shift for some strange reason. There is a tiny little margin of error when it comes to that. So you want to pull out any elements, whether they be images or color blocks, to at least 1/8 of an inch past the trim edge of the page. In this case, we're not going to add a bleed. We will revisit this in another chapter. So leave as is, say OK. Okay, so to review what we just did, we have a single page. We have our margins here, which is 1/4 of an inch to the edge of the trim. This black line is the edge of our page. This is the margin. These here are the columns, or the grid, so to speak. So when you start to place your elements in, you can align them properly, and you're not just placing elements floating on the page, which you really want to avoid. It's all about anchoring elements, and again, it's not that you have to stay to each one of these for everything. You still have your freedom, but it gives you a little bit of structure on the page. So here's our workspace. What we have here is a couple of things that you want to know. Up here is your control panel. It is context sensitive, meaning if I go to my type tool on my toolbar, and I place in a box, everything I need for typography is in the control panel. Okay? Now, if I decide I want to add an element, let's say I add an ellipse, a lot of things, if I go to the selection tool, what ends up happening is I have things that are related to the ellipse tool and to the shape. What you see here, this box that's surrounding the shape, is called the bounding box. You have a bounding box both on a shape as well, if I go to the selection tool, as well as the type. It's very different than Word and other word processing programs in the sense that you have the freedom to sort of move things around at your will. And this is great. It gives us a great amount of freedom for design. You have to be in the selection tool to move an element. So if I have type in the type tool, let's say type here, I go to the selection tool to then move it from left to right. A lot of people have a hard time with that. They feel like if they add a text box that it's there just like it would be in Word, but it's not. Think of this as like your desktop. So you have your page, and then you also have a scratch board. So if you're designing something, you want to move it aside onto the scratch board, this will not print. This is sort of an outside working area for you. Again, you want to be in your selection tool. I would suggest looking at each one of these tools. The nice thing about your toolbar is it can be anchored to the left side or pulled in close to you. You can also change the way that appears by just clicking on these double arrows. I like it in double form, or you can, if you need some more real estate on your page, you can obviously switch it to a more singular area. But go ahead and view each one of these tools to see what they do for you. There are little arrows at the bottom of the tools, if you click and hold down, that give you a few extra functions. For example, this you can type on a path. Any ones that do not have them, again, you won't have any more options than what's provided for you. If I go to the pen tool, click and hold down, I have pen tool, add an anchor point, delete an anchor point, convert a direction point. Convert direction point tool. So there's a lot of different options for you hidden. They're called your hidden options. You'll find that in Chapter 1. If you click and hold down, there's also something that that will allow you to tear off if you want. If you want to keep it, usually there's a tear off symbol. Some of you might find that it's usually a little tiny bar up top. You click on it and it allows you to pull that right into your workspace separately from your toolbar. Okay, down here you have your fill and your stroke. Right here is your default fill and stroke. If you add a fill to it, let's say I want to make a cyan color, that will now be my fill. If I want to change the ellipse to a cyan color, that's now my fill. If you click off, you notice there's this black line. That is called a stroke. Outline is called a stroke. You have to be very conscious to whether or not you are in the fill or in the stroke. Let's say I do not want a stroke at all. I go out to the swatches panel or even up here and click on none. Now there are multiple ways to access the same thing in InDesign, and this is what makes it very user-friendly, but also a little overwhelming when you look at everything that you're allowed to do and everything that's before you in the workspace. Okay, so I've reviewed a little bit here. I'm going to also show you some of the interesting points of the panels. You can click on the arrows and they will bump open or bump close. Swatches is something I keep open at all times, so I like to bump that open, pull it out. Pages is also something that I like to keep open at all times. I can pull that right out from the tab. Another thing that's interesting in InDesign with your panels, again, panels are what are anchored over here to the right, is that you can group panels according to what you like to work with. Swatches and pages are common for me, so I pull that out, I hover over the bottom, I see this little blue line that pops up, and then my pages panel becomes a little transparent. I let go. They are now anchored together, and they're floating panels, and they go with me to wherever I want them on the page. Okay. So your panels do a lot of interesting things. They're automatically pre-grouped for you, layers and links, and then this little arrow bumps it back in. Your links, your stroke, color. So you've got tabs up here. You can group them to how you like. I do use stroke quite often, so I'll pull that one out as well. And again, they expand or they get smaller. So you just click on this little arrow here. So I have my 3 floating panels that I know I like to work with. They come in other groups as well. This is the Essentials workspace. Up here allows you to find different workspaces. For example, if I'm going to be working on a project that's typography based only, I might go to the typography workspace. Look what ends up happening. All the panels that are most related to typography pop up, and then you can, of course, group them as you wish. Essentials is how our workspace defaults to when you open and launch InDesign. For example, if you want to group panels and then have that available to you each and every time you start a project, you might save your own workspace. Go up here, new workspace. Save it as, I'll just say Chrissy's workspace. Say OK. So each and every time I launch Illustrator, if it goes to Essentials, I can then just go down and hit Chrissy's workspace, and then my panels and my workspace will pop up. So this is a quick overview on panels, the toolbar. You've got your rulers up here, which we will cover in another chapter. But again, you've got your guides. We've set up a new document, and the control panel is context sensitive. This will help you in your first chapter 1 skills review when working, understanding what you're working with and the tools you have to work with. I'll see you in the next video.